Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of Tuesday Takes here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin, joined by the man himself. He's Tre'Shon Diaz at Tre'Shon, putting the special team sommelier out there today, to the chagrin of some, interestingly, but I've appreciated it because that's one thing, I think a lot of people don't really spend a lot of time breaking down is the mechanics of kicking and the special team stuff, which, it's just not something that appeals to the average fan necessarily, but I can appreciate it. It's like a fine wine. It's the whole sommelier thing, it's something that the true believers can appreciate. But I know you've been breaking down that film, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what to do about Younghoe Koo, and whether the Falcons need to make a move, whether they need to be patient, what can Koo do, that sort of thing, and of course get into this Saints game, what went wrong, what went right, because some things were fine in this game. There's a funny stat that like the Falcons had like a plus 15% success rate in their favor on offense, and they still lost, which is I think one of the only times that's happened this year. So obviously, the kicking has something to do with that, but we'll get into all that stuff. But before we do, Tre'Shon, tough game, frustrating game, but how you doing on this Monday? This is Tuesday Takes. It comes out on Tuesday, but spoiler alert, right. We do record on Monday sometimes.
Yeah. Breaking the fourth wall there, Kevin.
Yeah.
I'm obviously you don't want to lose. You don't want to lose to the Saints. That's a bummer. As a special teams guy. That title is earned every day. It's not given. So I had to come out, today, Monday, Tuesday, and every day moving forward, kind of showing what's going on there. So hopefully people are able to learn something and find that interesting. But you never feel as good coming off a loss as you do a win. So, can't say that I'm feeling great today, but the season's not over and it's far from it. So we've got a lot to get into.
Yeah. So, we'll get into all that, guys. And we'll talk about the special teams, we'll talk about the offense, talk about the defense, talk about the injuries, because unfortunately we have some probably bad news on several players coming out of this game that we'll get to here. Obviously, we won't get an official report until Wednesday, but the early returns are pretty not great on some guys, better on others. But real quick, we'll get to our sponsor, BetOnline, folks. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting options, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to bet on the games as they happen. If that's your thing, I think it's a little too much for me to track personally. Like, oh, this is going this way. Now I want to bet, I feel like I need to like plan my bets out like really intensely. And it usually doesn't work either, but like at least I feel better going in like, oh, I've crunched the numbers, I've figured out like, Bijan Robinson, like last year, like Bijan receiving props were like just easy money, like he was just, they were always like 25 yards. I was like, oh, Bijan's getting that in like 2 plays. Like they're going to throw like 6 balls at Bijan. So if he doesn't get that, I'm just going to cry. But if you want to bet in game, you can sometimes find value if that's your thing. But no matter what you bet on, guys, BetOnline's got the largest selection of odds from everything, including NFL football, college football, NBA, college basketball, NHL, UFC, MMA, all that good stuff. So what are you waiting for, folks? Head to BetOnline today. BetOnline.ag is the website to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Make sure when you sign up to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to get access to the latest promotions. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, real quick, because these tweets just came out from the team. Couple of updates on injury front. Mike Hughes left the game with a neck injury and did not return. That's obviously scary whenever you see that. Good news there. Mike Hughes had an MRI and he's cleared to return, so he should be back on the field. Team probably being very cautious, obviously, with any neck injuries, as you should. However, linebacker Troy Anderson re-aggravated the knee injury, and we don't really know what that means, unfortunately. And the other one, Taquan Graham left the game with a pec injury, and Raheem Morris says, quote, not so good. And I think we all know that means he probably tore his pec. So, that's bad. And apparently James Smith-Williams also suffered a, quote, not so good injury. So the Falcons don't have any edge rushers, and they're losing the ones that they do have in the meantime. But Khalid Kareem played some snaps and was okay. So I guess, that's all we have now is Khalid Kareem and Damone Harris. That's going to be our future at edge rusher. So I guess when you're the worst pass rush, like it's like, what are we really losing? It's like, how much worse can it really get? But that's it can get much worse is the answer. But yeah, I just wanted to get those out there because we just saw that come in. Obviously, the Troy Anderson one kind of makes sense given that he barely played. And didn't look good at all when he was out there. So, he almost made a big tackle and whiffed on it. That's not great. But yeah, obviously they were really counting on Anderson coming back, and the fact that he's immediately re-aggravated the injury is a very, very bad sign for his prognosis going forward this year.
Yeah, it was frustrating watching the game because I was just kind of like, Troy's back. He's cleared. Nate Landman is starting in nickel. Troy is not back. He is not healthy. Like, it just kind of immediately just hit my mind. This situation was botched. Like, I'm sorry. Like, and that doesn't mean that like we should be upset or like, look at the team and say they can't take care of people. Like, that's not the case, but they did botch this situation. The initial diagnosis was day to day, which implied that the MCL sprain was like a grade 1. Grade 1 sprains take like 1 to 2 weeks sometimes to heal. At this point in the recovery timeline, we're looking at about 6 weeks plus. That's a grade 3 sprain. Sometimes those take guys out for like 10 weeks at a time. You typically get put on IR when you have a grade 3 sprain because it's just simply going to take patience and you're just going to have to keep sitting. The Falcons did not ever put him on IR, but he's been in practice the past few weeks. It's clear that they've been trying to get him back to the level where they think, okay, this could be the week where he's ready to go. And it unfortunately just did not pan out that way. And it's looking like this is going to honestly affect the rest of the entire season. I would find it hard to believe if we don't see Troy like kind of get sat back down again, or if maybe they finally do hit him with the IR designation, because if he re-aggravated the grade 3 sprain, that could mean that he's, maybe not all the way back at step 1, but he could only be back. He could be all the way back at step 2 of this like recovery process.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems like there was a misunderstanding of what it was, because they didn't put him on IR. And it's like a lot of people are getting bent out of shape that like they didn't put him on IR. It's like they didn't really need to. Like there wasn't a pressing need for the roster spot. So like, I get that they were like they thought that maybe he could come back. Like I'm not so upset about that. What I'm upset about is he's still not playing, and he gets back on the field for a couple snaps and is clearly still hurt. And it's like, I mean, I don't. They said he was practicing fully all week, and then he comes out, plays like a handful of snaps, and gets hurt again. It's just like I don't. Maybe that's just bad luck. I don't know, but it doesn't feel great to see that. And this linebacker core without him is one of the least athletic in the league right now. And like Caden Ellis does a couple things really well, like when he moves forward. But if he has to move back or side to side, it's going to be problematic. And we've seen it. Like there's a couple things that he does really well, and right now, he's the bright spot, and inconsistency is sort of what he's given us. Although against the Cowboys the week before played one of his best games. So we'll see how he progresses. Hopefully Nate Landman will get healthier and move better over the course of the year. But that linebacker room is in dire straits right now, and it doesn't look like Troy is going to be able to reinforce them the way we hoped. And taking more losses on the defensive line as well, which was already pretty bad. So not a great situation.
Yeah, no, it's not. And yeah, I mean, just kind of like just hearing you go through the laundry list of like, these issues all affect the front seven, which has been like, one of the most disappointing parts about this team this year. So, one way or another, Zach Harrison, you're getting those reps, buddy. Like they're coming now, because I'm not really sure what the Falcons can do at this point. You just have to look, inward at what you have. Damone Harris Guess what, buddy? You're probably going to get that 53 spot now. Surprised you didn't get it this past game.
Right.
Pass rush had one of its worst performances in weeks without you. That kind of says it all to me. But, it is what it is. I think that, the close that we saw from this Atlanta defense, and, we'll get into it more, was very promising. Like very, very promising. I feel like it's almost being overlooked. But they're going to have some challenges now moving forward this week. And we're going to, hope that these injuries are something that can at least be mitigated once we get to and through the bye.
Yeah, that's the hope. And maybe, with the bye week, that'll be enough to get some of these guys back. And, Drew Dahlman sat this week after practicing fully as well, which again is like, why, if he's practicing fully for over a week, like why are you not activating him? That's obviously a question that probably doesn't have a great answer anywhere. But not that Ryan Newsel played poorly or anything. It's just Newsel's been solid. So maybe they just don't feel like they need to rush him back because of that. But definitely an interesting situation.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, Drew Dahlman should be back this week. And this is going to be a game where the run game is going to have to be a massive factor, given that that's like the one weakness of this Denver Broncos defense, where they've been one of the NFL's best passing defenses and best pass rushes. They don't stop to run. So, like, that's one area where the Falcons maybe could just unleash this run game, hit them with the old Arthur Smith special, and find a way to win through the ground game, which I think has slowly, like, over time become like the more reliable part of the offense now. I think that the passing game is explosive, which is great. But the consistency of the passing game is not there. And I think the run game has started to become more consistent. So maybe you start to balance this out a little bit more and can win in a couple different ways. And we'll see how they approach that. But, staying on the topic of the defense, considering the injuries, like, I did think it was interesting to see them give so many snaps to Khalid Kareem, and I'm wondering if that was because they weren't ready to promote Damone Harris. They're like, well, I guess we'll call up somebody else and see how they play, and that he was fine. He had that impact play against the run. Certainly, that was a big factor in the second half. I don't think he got blown off the ball or anything, so that's nice to see off a guy fresh off the practice squad. He comes out there, holds his own, and look like a good run defender on the edge, which the Falcons need that. So, like, if they could, again, like, they need to try to find, like, they didn't trade for anyone, so they got to try to churn the practice squad and find guys that can contribute in the rotation. And maybe, with Damone Harris and now with this Khalid Kareem guy, maybe they have found some contributors, but, like, those aren't the guys that are going to change your pass rush fortunes, but they might be able to give you some quality snaps as the year goes on. And this is also for the future too. Like, they're going to have to find some cheap, reliable guys to round out this defensive line room, and maybe they are they're getting to some of these guys. But yeah, I mean, thoughts on yeah. I mean, you mentioned it. Damone Harris didn't play at all. I'm guessing they weren't quite ready to cut somebody yet. D'Angelo Malone had his second straight game of just not good. Because I was one of the only remaining D'Angelo Malone stands, and I think I'm gonna have to get off the train now. I think we've seen enough, as they say, and it's not been great. But what'd you think about the defensive line performance this game? I didn't even mention my son Eddie Goldman, which we talked about last week, and once again, following our asking for something on this podcast, it happens and it produces good results. Maybe we got the sauce or something. I'm not sure.
There's definitely something working. Yeah, I think that the things that stood out to me from this game on the defensive line was one, Eddie Goldman, like you said, we saw that snap share increase, and he looked a lot better than the play that we've been getting. So I think it was nice to see them just kind of fully commit and just cut the old man loose. The other player that I thought had a pretty good showing was David Onyemata. Do had 2 TFLs. He was able to get a pressure in. He just played one of his more solid and sound games. I thought he did a really good job of anchoring, was much better at the point of attack, and I think he did a really good job of maintaining his gap responsibilities. And it shows when you look at the performance that Kamara had on the ground. Like, the Falcons were able to basically hold him in check for one of his worst games this year, and that was him coming off one of his best games. I think in his career. I think he had the most rushing yards on the ground in his career the previous week. So those two guys really stood up and made a difference. We saw them go away from D'Angelo Malone in the second half, and I think that was the right move. They started getting better results. Other than that, though, it kind of felt like more of the same. Like we talked about, we're not really seeing them get a ton of pressure or anything like that. That's not really new. When you look at kind of where the Saints had success, I think this is the first time we've seen a team be able to get the deep ball going against Atlanta. And like some of that is obviously pass rush, but when you look back at the film, it really just comes down to the corners losing those matchups more than anything. So honestly, like I said, outside of 1 second quarter, the defense pretty much handled the Saints. Like they really had no answers for them outside of just 2 MVS go balls.
Yeah, and that one, Alvin Kamara dropped touchdown, but
yeah,
technically he dropped it. But like, I don't want to. It's like people are like, "Oh, they played a great second half." It's like, okay, maybe I would say good second half. Okay, like let's not forget Alvin Kamara dropped a wide open 60-yard touchdown. So let's maybe like back off of that just a little bit. But yes, like on the whole, the second half was much better. And Eddie Goldman, after playing like 3 snaps up to 24, obviously that needs to continue. We saw Contavious Street get a snap share, and again, he looks like a solid rotational player. He's gotten better than his early season sort of start, which was problematic. Like it was not good. It's a shame that Joseph Williams got hurt because I thought he was having a solid game when he was out there. Honestly, like, we haven't seen, like, it's weird, but this is like one of Judon's better games. Like, I mean, I don't think it was great, but we did see him get a pressure like as soon as he got on the field, and he had a run stop, and I'll take it. But I mean, look, these guys keep going down. Taquan Graham goes down, only ends up playing 11 snaps. The Falcons still aren't giving a snap share to Zach Harrison. He's still at just 15 snaps in this game. Looked like Arnold Ebiketie played, less snaps in this one. Falcons defense as a whole, just played less snaps this game, so that's probably a factor of that. I believe there were only 53 total defensive snaps, which is nice because the Falcons usually allow a lot more plays than that. I think they average 64 plays per game, which is almost the worst in the NFL on defense. So much less plays, so that the snap share is going to be a factor there as well. But it seemed like they played this game aggressively to start. It looked like they were pulling the safeties up more, and in the moment, I was like, oh man, this really pisses me off. Like, how do you take this team so lightly? But it's honestly, you should take, these receivers, they shouldn't scare you. You should be able to trust AJ Terrell and your corners to be able to man up or cover these, I'm sorry, jag receivers, and be able to be a little bit more aggressive with your safety play. You should be able to trust them to do that. They did not. I mean, Clark Phillips got absolutely roasted on 2 plays, and the MVS touchdown in the red zone, that was just a coverage handoff mistake. And that was just a good play call, honestly, where you stressed out Jesse Bates' responsibilities to the line of scrimmage or to the coverage. And, he played closer to the line of scrimmage, but if he takes 3 steps backwards, that's probably a pick. So it's just but he has to choose before the ball's snapped. Am I going to play the run or am I going to play the pass? Chose wrong. It's a touchdown. No way AJ Terrell can get from the right hash or the left hash all the way to the middle of the field and faster than the guy that's lined up 5 yards inside of him. I mean, that people you don't get mad at AJ Terrell for that. There's literally nothing he could do there, unless he was the fastest man on earth, or something like that. But ultimately, I think the run defense, that's the one thing you could take away from this. The run defense had probably their best game of the year, and Eddie Goldman was a big part of that. But Khalid Kareem plays 9 snaps, which not much, right? Has 2 run stops and 9 snaps. That's what you want to see from a guy you're pulling up off the practice squad. If you're going to come in, are you going to contribute? And absolutely, the Saints tried to go after him. He shuts him down. No missed 3 total tackles, no misses, 2 run stops. So that's positive. if like because they may need someone to fill in for James Smith-Williams in that role now that he's potentially has a significant injury, and maybe they happen to find someone right there. But yeah, the first half was just it was brutal. It was like they would play good defense, and they were getting the Saints in 3rd and long, like a lot, which is like this is something they were struggling to do early in the season, and they were just giving up they gave up 2 straight 3rd and 14s. And one of them was like basically a touchdown, like a huge touchdown play. So, they seemed like they went into this game not respecting the Saints offense. And like, I think there's like, when I say that, it's like, I am trying to call them out a little bit, like maybe you're a little overconfident, but like, did the Saints offense actually deserve respect? I think that's up for debate, right? But like, it bit them. It bit them early when the Saints were able to get those big plays, especially when I think it was the first 3rd and 14. The Falcons like sent the house. Like they sent 7 rushers, I think, and the Saints just threw right behind it and got a big play out of it. So, this defense still feels like it's not quite sure exactly who they want to be.
Yeah, honestly, when I like coming into this game, like obviously, like in terms of like the Saints as a franchise, very little respect for them as a franchise. But I wasn't really looking at this opponent with the energy of like, oh, like it's just going to be in the bag. The first time we played the Saints, they had just lost their best starting offensive lineman. They had lost another offensive lineman. I think Olave had just come back from being injured the first go round, but this was a team that was still missing some pieces and wasn't necessarily looking too great then, and it was a 2-point game. So in my mind, I'm already just kind of in this mindset of like, it's a division game, it's a dogfight, and like it doesn't really matter who's out there. And like, obviously most of those guys, like you heard it during the game, it's like, yeah, they brought this guy up from the practice squad this week. They did an open try. Like, you're hearing all these things. And so it's like, okay, yeah, not great talent, but like hungry talent, like driven players who are like, we're getting a game day check this week. And like, we want to keep getting these checks. MVS, like, still has elite speed. Like the man,
that's his thing.
One for every, like he catches 2, he drops 6. Like that seems to be like his percentages. And unfortunately, he just had 2 back-to-back catches for what feels like the first time in years. I don't think he even did that for Pat consistently, like as he was on his way out at the Chiefs. So, it is unfortunate. I agree with you. I think they came out flat in the first half. Like it just was very much like Seattle in that there was just not really this like same level of energy you've seen, because even when they've had bad starts, you still see like this different attitude from either the offense or the defense. And we just didn't really get that. It just kind of looked like, we're off. Like we're just kind of like not really feeling it before they got into the locker room at half, in which then we saw the defense like start playing much better. 5 3-and-outs out of 6 drives in the second half. That's pretty impressive. Like, yeah, we account for the Kamara drop, but like overall, it's like you can't really ask for, a better performance outside of just getting straight up turnovers. And so, that's when you look at Koo and when we look at this offense, and we kind of have to see, obviously everybody didn't play perfectly, but why did those 2 areas of the game have such a big letdown, and just not really able to recover or find their footing?
Yeah. That's kind of my takeaway from the beginning of this game is like on my game preview show, like the one thing I said is like, look, the Falcons have the better talent. They're clearly playing better, but the Saints, like this is their Super Bowl. Like they are going to come in. They just fired a coach that everybody hates. The whole locker room apparently hated Dennis Allen. Like,
and it seemed like it.
It's like, wow, I can't believe this guy kept his job this offseason considering how much everybody hated him, but whatever. More poor management, but like that's a huge weight off everyone's shoulders. They hate the Falcons' guts as we hate their guts. Like it doesn't matter what the stats say or what the rosters say. They were going to play the best version of themselves. Like the talent, like, and that happens in division games regularly. Like it doesn't matter what the talent differential says. And again, I think this game is a good example of like NFL players, even coming off the practice squad, are good football players. Like, they may not be stars, they may not be great players, but pretty much everyone, even practice squad guys, are like at least serviceable players. Like, you're not
Yeah.
really like, even if you have to play backups, like, these guys are not bums for the most part. Like, these guys are going to play well. It's up to you to like, and the Saints playing at probably their highest energy level since week 1. They were going to play above their weight class, and my thing was the Falcons are going to have to match that energy if they want to win this game, and they didn't do that until the second half, and that cost them in the end. I feel like they just kind of came out flat. I think they were shocked that the Saints were playing man coverage, and that was a big change. Like, the Saints played more than 50% zone all season, and they basically played man the whole game. I mean, there were some snaps of zone still. Obviously, you never run straight one or the other, but like, they played very a very high percentage man coverage. Like, I think it was like 4 snaps of man to every 1 snap of zone in this game. And that definitely surprised the Falcons, clearly, from the get-go, which, like, you got to tip the cap. Like, they changed drastically to try to catch the Falcons unaware, and it did work, I think, early in the game. But,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, and like, that's kind of why, like, the whole "this isn't a trap game" thing never really resonated with me. Like, I get not leaning too far into some of these things, but I think to come out and say that definitely then changes the attitude of the locker room and also changes their mindset. This is like the definition of a trap game. You're playing a team that has literally nothing to lose. They are 2-7. Like, their season's done. It's cooked. Like, they have no idea like who will or won't be there next year. And it's a division rival. Like, anything happens in those games, this is literally where teams get trapped and fall into a sense of like false security. And that's kind of what it sounded like, was happening. And that it's like, oh, no, guys, it's fine. Like, yeah. And it was just kind of shocking or a little surprising to hear that coming from Raheem too, who kind of like leans into these rivalry games and everything like that. He certainly did the first like go round, but it just kind of seemed like now it was like, hey, we took care of these guys once. It's in the bag. Don't worry about it. And like, when you go back and look at that first game, that game was by no means in the bag. Koo and Troy saved them.
It
that
was
game.
the opposite. Yeah, it was
like
the opposite.
The complete opposite of what happened this game is like that game was literally saved by like the leg of Koo, which is probably why Raheem is like, I've got a lot of faith in Koo still, because it's like, yeah, he saved you like a couple of times this year already.
Yeah, no, there's no, and we'll get to Koo. But the kickers are the perfect example of, you have to have 5 good plays for every bad one in the NFL, or you're a bad player. It's just like, that's the way it is, So, it is certainly an interesting, view into the human psyche with how these things, people's perception of these things. But also, the Falcons just signed Lamar Jackson, Tre'Shon, to the practice squad, the cornerback, not the quarterback, but they did finally sign Lamar Jackson. I know everyone's been waiting with bated breath for that. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like, this was the opposite of that week 4 game where the Falcons offense did nothing all game. Like, they didn't score an offensive touchdown. They were relying entirely on field goals, defensive touchdowns, like special teams touchdowns. Like, they didn't score an offensive touchdown in that game. And they relied entirely on Younghoe Koo to get that done. And some, Kaderil Hodge heroics. Shout out to Kaderil Hodge again. But like, this time, like, the offense, outside of a few spots, like namely the first and fourth quarters, like, they were really moving the ball like without too much trouble. The troubles came on third down, where they were just very inconsistent today, which is, they had gotten better, I think, on third down over the past several weeks. It's just didn't really work super well in this one. And I'm in the midst of breaking that down and going through all those plays on Twitter. I'm about halfway through now, but it's just, to me, a lot of it is that the Falcons put an enormous amount of trust in the passing game, especially that like 10 to 15 yard range, where Kirk just, like, if he sees one-on-one, he lets it fly, even on third and short in that range. And like, as good as like they've been at converting that and hitting those passes, and like, even in this game, like, their misses were like fingertips or like Drake coming down with his toe out of bounds or something, like, and that one to Drake, that was like he was wide open. That was 100% on Cousins. Just, you got to put it on him, man. He's wide ass
Yeah.
open. You can't make him try to make a circus catch on the sideline there. But um that was, I think, a problem in this one, is that there's, I think, a little too much trust in their ability to convert these 50-50 balls consistently. And like, at a certain point, it's more important to just keep the drive going than to go for explosives all the time. And I think that's a lesson that this team's going to have to learn. And one of the big things, one of the plays that like really frustrated me was, and this is one where Darnell Mooney gets held by Ugo Amadi like the whole time. So like, that obviously, like, it should have never mattered one way or the other. But Saints come out, and it's basically, I think it's 3rd and 1, and the Falcons, have Tyler Algier in the backfield, so the option to check to a run play is there. But I mean, it's 3rd and 1, and Cousins goes for Mooney on the outside, working one-on-one while he's being held, and like, Darnell Mooney almost comes down with the catch too. But the Saints have 6 men in the box, and there's 5 guys in the line of scrimmage, but 2 of them drop immediately. And it's just like, man, Algier could have gotten 10 yards on this carry. Like, I mean, if you're seeing a 6-man box on 3rd and 1, that's almost unheard of. But it's because I think the Saints understand that, like, the Falcons just don't run on short yardage that often. And when they do, they typically telegraph it by having a bunch of tight ends out there, or, they have this more condensed formation. And it's like, this is the perfect opportunity to run on 3rd down. You got a running back in the backfield. They're showing you 6 men in the box with 1 linebacker and everybody else spread. Like, Algier just needs to move forward and needs a 1st down. And if he gets past that line of scrimmage and breaks a tackle, I mean, this is an explosive run. So you're not going to get many better looks than that for a run on 3rd down. And, the fact that they passed it up to, again, attempt, this one was more like a 7 to 10 yard pass. But again, it's 3rd and 1. And you're at your 14-yard line. You need to keep this drive alive. Like, you need to go for the highest percentage play you got. And, I think the aggression, they're starting to, I think, maybe feel themselves a little too much on offense, that we're this great offense. We can do this. We can hit these passes and march down the field. And it's like, maybe, like, just walk before you start running. Like, how about you get out of your 20 before you start chucking it 10 yards on 3rd and 1? Let's just convert some of these 3rd downs and keep these drives going, especially when you're getting crushed early, you're down points. Like, we need to keep this drive going. We can't just give the ball right back. So that was a bit frustrating, but we'll see how it, plays out over the course of the game. But just kind of one of my takeaways through half these plays is that Cousins is just passing on these easy completions for these deeper throws. And I think that that's a mistake, given you just need to keep drives going. You can't just always go for explosive plays. Even though they're great at explosive plays, they're one of the NFL's best this year, you can't build a consistent offense out of explosive plays. That's just one part of a consistent offense.
Yeah, and, I think the other thing is just kind of, they didn't really respond as well to blitz and pressure in general this week. It kind of looked like the team from weeks 1 through 7 instead of the one we just saw from 8 through 10. Or 8 through 9. And we saw them take major strides. Before that, in weeks 1 through 7, they were one of the worst performing teams against blitz and pressure. They were just not having good answers. And it was kind of a lot of, just rely on your guy to win whatever route is already called, instead of dialing up some man beaters and kind of making some adjustments. Like, when we saw Kirk last week, and we saw that adjustment on the play to Mooney where he checks at the line to get them in a better situation, it didn't really feel like the Falcons had as good of answers to those problems. And it also just kind of felt like you said, Kirk was very much locking in. And it felt a little obsessive, where he needed to get those completions to Mooney, where he's seeing that, okay, like he is like getting open just enough for me to be able to get the ball to him, that he can come down and make a tough catch. But when you start making every pass attempt a contested one, it's not going to yield great results. You need to be able to get those easy plays. You need to be able to get those easy completions so that you can move the ball and kind of just be able to keep going. And to your point, then you can take more risk, or you can be more strategic about when you do take those shots. And I also think this was kind of the first game too where we saw the explosive play happen on the ground. And so I think there needs to be, a little bit more, I think, of understanding from the passing offensive side of things that, like, hey, like, Bijan is due. He is going to rip off big runs for us as well. And we can generate those big plays by simply handing him the ball and letting him go to work instead of us always having to make these higher difficulty plays happen on those, critical third downs. Because like you said, it kind of fell back into being that, like, really rough third down offense. They just didn't really approach that down as well, again, as we've seen them in the past couple of weeks. And I don't know if the switch to more man threw off Robinson. I'm not sure if there was anything like that kind of made him feel a little uncomfortable in terms of how he should adjust and move forward with his game plan, because we obviously don't know what he was planning for coming in. So it's one of those things where I think OC had a learning moment. Like, hey, especially when you play division opponents, you usually see some major tweaks from the team that lost when you come into that matchup again. Like, they are prepared more for you as an opponent compared to the guys that you're only going to see once, and they don't have to deal with you again. So the Saints were able to deploy two different approaches on defense, and they found one that worked better. And I would expect now more teams are going to man up against the Falcons and make the receivers and the OC kind of beat them to the best of their ability.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that they will. And, my guess is they game planned all week, to go up against what was a heavy zone defense. And then, when you come into the game and it's not that, it does take time to adjust. I think they adjusted in the second quarter, in the second half, and they played better against it. And like we talked about pre-show, like, the refs let the Saints get away with a lot. Like, they definitely allowed a lot of contact and a lot of grabbing, and they did that on both sides. The Saints got away with a lot more of it, but at least they called it pretty consistently in the game. But like that, if you're gonna allow guys to do that in man coverage, it's gonna slow down a lot of passing games. So it seemed to be just what this crew wanted to do. But ultimately, you're gonna call. There's different plays that beat man. There's zone beaters and man beaters, and the Falcons looked like they were expecting to see a lot more zone, and I think that showed up in the play calling. And I hope maybe they take this as a sign. Maybe we should practice more man beating concepts and make sure we drilled that stuff too, so that when we do go up against more man heavy teams, that we can go out there and have a game plan that's going to be a little bit more effective against that. But ultimately, also, I think the run game, like, I think the time has come, like, especially if we get Drew Dahlman back, like, the time has come to lean on this run game, especially like on short yardage. Like, you don't have to telegraph it. You don't have to, line up in a condensed formation or whatever. But like, if you're going to get teams giving you like that 3rd and 1 where they put 6 men in the box and they're spread out, and you need a yard with your back already in the backfield, like, you need to be checking into those run plays, because if you like that, you're not going to get a higher percentage play than that. Like, I don't care what the pass concepts look like. Like, if they're playing that much coverage, how can you not check to that run? And so far, I think they need to threaten the run more on 3rd down. And right now, they're not really running on 3rd down. Like, as much as they should. Like, for this team, like, I think 3rd and 4 even is an option, especially if you're in that sort of like no man's land where we know this team's super aggressive on 4th down. Like, they should be running more on these 3rd and shorts, because if you're planning to go on 4th anyway, like, maybe that run sets, like, maybe it doesn't get the first, but maybe it gets you to 4th and inches, and that makes that a much easier proposition than the 4th and 4 that you were going to be facing with an incompletion. So, I think we need. My takeaway is that we need to put more respect on the run game, and maybe maybe be a little bit less aggressive in the passing game in certain situations. I think their aggressiveness on first down is good. Like I think they like their first down play calling has been some of the best in the league in terms of effectiveness. It's just been the third downs have kind of been very inconsistent for them. I think over the past several weeks they had gotten a lot better. This was a step back. And I think again it's just you can kind of feel it. Like Kirk, I think in this one, as soon as they got down, he just started to really try to push it. And I think you got to relax. Like this offense is good enough. You don't need like explosive plays every down to catch back up in this game. Like have faith that you can grind this down the field with your run game. Look for those high percentage throws, and convert that way. But it part of the problem too is like if the pass protection has any problem, Perk is getting sacked and he's probably fumbling, and he's got to figure a way to not cough the ball up every time he gets sacked. Because right now, I mean, what was it? 3 fumbles and 3 sacks in this game, or so? Like he can't
he's 3 sacks, 2 fumbles.
Yeah, he just can't cough up the ball like that. Like he just has zero feel for pressure right now, and I don't know if that's a product of like being off the field for so long, last year, that he just kind of forgot what it feels like and forgot the pressure thing. But he's just sitting back there like getting and like the pressure today, like he's not expecting Caleb McGarry to trip twice. I mean that's just bad luck. But like you gotta like feel that pressure better. He looks so, every time he gets sacked, it's like he's completely shocked. So that's not great. You don't like to see that.
Yeah, no, you don't. And I think like you really pointed it out that like Kirk was really starting to press. You saw them really start to just make those little mistakes that they're not really like, or they really haven't been making this year. That interception is such a good example of that. Like that's literally just pressing. That is like an unforced error that was completely unnecessary. And we were lucky to even get the ball back after that with like the score unchanged. So it's just kind of one of those things where you want the QB to slow down, and a great way to do that, to your point, would be getting the run involved. Because I don't know if anybody realizes this, but Bijan had 116 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns, and another, again, 30 yards as a receiver. It's just kind of getting ridiculous at this point, because there's nothing the man can't do. And we're really just kind of seeing him come into form. It was like this against Seattle. Everybody else was having that down day. And then you peek at Bijan's stats and you're like, oh, didn't realize you were having one of those games, man. Like, dang, like we all, we saw that big run, but it's like somehow all of these like 8-yard, 7-yard games that he just rips off at will get kind of like lost in the shuffle of these performances. So you definitely want to see them lean on that more, because the talent is there. And I was very happy that like on that last 4th down on the goal line, they stuck to the run, because I think the run was right, but like they're figuring it out. And I love Algier. I actually don't think he's a great short distance runner, because I think he has a more narrow vision, if you will. Like he's very much also a traditional back in that he's looking for the hole where it's supposed to be, and he's going to do what he can to go through it. Bijan is like one of 4 guys who can make that jump cut without their knee exploding. Like just the fact that he's able to just make that cut and then fully put everything on that leg and then just dive for. I'm like, that's a freak athlete that you can't teach anybody how to do that. And so we're really just seeing in like every aspect of the run game, Bijan start to just showcase why he was taken 8th overall. And like the one thing I will say where the generational tagline is 100% appropriate is that man's vision. That man has generational vision.
Yeah. And that's the biggest part of short yardage running. And I think you nailed it. Like I think traditionally, teams have a power back for short yardage, but raw power against a goal line front isn't the answer. Like sometimes it can work, but most of the time it's you get that ball and you have to find the crack. It's not going to be a hole if you're going up against a goal line front. There's not going to be a big hole for you. Like it's not going to be large unless your offensive line is just God tier. You're going to have to find the crack and press it as hard as you can. And Bijan does a great job of that, and that's what we saw. Like it's not just the power run, the power to push through contact, because at a certain point there's no amount of power that you can generate that's going to get you through that line. It's also about the short area quickness, the lateral mobility, the ability to find that crack wherever it is in the front and just get that hair. And Bijan doesn't have the raw power that Algier does, but he doesn't need it. It's not necessary for his running style. Whereas like Algier, you see it and again, there's no slander intended at Algier, but he takes negative runs because if people get a hand on him, like he can't really adjust his trajectory in the backfield. So if there's an issue up front and someone gets past the line of scrimmage and his lane is affected, he might be able to break the tackle, but if he can't, like he's not really slipping out of that. And even if he does, he's not going to be able to recover and get much in the way of positive yardage because he's a build-up speed runner, and that's just how a lot of guys are. Whereas Bijan, you mentioned it, like his athletic ability and short area quickness, I mean, it's just unique. Like he can do things that you shouldn't be able to do. And what we're seeing this year, and this is why, things have changed. Like I think last year we saw Algier legitimately show some like that he might have been the better short yardage back. Because I think Bijan, like most rookies, kind of like another example of they just press more. They try to charge at the line of scrimmage. They just want to get to the hole as fast as possible. Bijan has calmed down and taken that year. And the NFL, and that's what you'll see with these generational talents, is it doesn't take them 3 years or 4 years to catch up to the speed of the NFL game. It takes them like a year, and then they get it, and it's like, oh yeah, now I can see this at full speed, and it's not going to phase me, and I know exactly where to go. And you just watch. His running is so special, and we're really seeing it come forward this year, and that's part of the reason that they just need to give him the ball. Like he's that rare runner where like you consider giving it to him on second and long because the chance of an explosive run is high, like relatively speaking, and it kind of makes that proposition like more enticing because that his chance for a like 5+ yard run is significantly higher than any other back. And so that could make that wrong decision right. And it's just a higher percentage play. And when you have guys that can give you that high percentage 5+ yard gain on any given down, you just have to mash that button as much as you can. Like it's like a cheat code, and I think it kind of, and like this is coming from the guy that makes fun every time somebody runs on 2nd and 10. So like the analytics aren't kind to that, but like Bijan's one of those guys where if you have 2nd and long, preferably like 2nd and 8 or something, not 2nd and 10, but whatever. Him running the football there might not be the worst idea because the chance of him getting that 5+ yard carry and putting you in 3rd and short is probably higher than a pass play getting you 10+ yards and getting the first down. So, he kind of challenges your preconceptions about what your run game can function as because of his explosive ability.
And just his ability to kind of like hide everyone else's mistakes. Like when we look at EPA, Bijan had an EPA of 6+ yesterday. That's like almost unheard of for running backs. You know what that stat comes from? It comes from runningbacksdon'tmatter.com. That's where that statistic I got came from. That's how good Bijan is. No one else on the Falcons had above a 2.0 EPA grade except for Darnell Mooney at 3.4 and Kyle Pitts at 2.9. Everybody else was below 2. And the great way to kind of showcase that statistics in a practical way is to look at Bijan's yards after contact. Out of his 116 rushing yards, 86 came after he was contacted. That's unreal. He's averaging almost 50 yards after contact per game at this point, because there's been plenty of times when you go back and look at the film where you see the first 1.5 seconds of the play after the ball is snapped, and you're just kind of like, oh,
yeah,
like, this blocking, or someone's already like in the backfield, and Bijan just somehow turns it into a 7, 6, 5 yard play. And he's consistently like forgiving your offense when they do have poor execution or aren't executing across the board the way that they need to. And so it just goes back to the point that we've been driving home, which is that they really need to reevaluate how they look at these runs and kind of put a little bit more faith into the idea of like he's going to pop one. He got a lot of rushing opportunities yesterday, and I don't like, I can't predict the future, but the more chances he gets to touch the ball, the more likely it is that he's going to rip that run off. And we saw that happen in the game yesterday.
Yeah, he's been so close so many times too. He's had some called back by kind of ticky-tack penalties.
He almost lost that one.
Yeah,
like, he was
exactly.
So close. I could tell he was so like, you
Yeah.
could see in the moment where he's like, no.
I'm not. No, this is this is happening. Like, sorry, Tyron Matthew. This is happening. It's wild to see him stumble and still like keep gaining on people. Like, people don't understand. Like, that is to be able to like maintain velocity while you're losing your footing. I mean, that's crazy stuff. Like, he's such a special player. He's the type of guy you build your offense around. And it's like the Falcons have a couple guys like that. It's like, oh yeah, you got Drake London, you got Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney looks like one of the best deep ball receivers in the NFL. He's creating separation. You got Kyle Pitts. Like, that catch from Kyle Pitts, like, he was not targeted frequently in this game, which I think is a mistake, but that catch, like, that is Kyle Pitts, man. Like, give him a chance at that ball and he'll come down with it. Like, that is a Kyle Pitts route.
First one he's gotten like that since Matt was here. Like, that's the first real targeted like jump ball.
Like, go, like, give him a chance at that. Like, and he's got the catch radius. He's got the hands. I mean, look, put up on his college tape. His entire college, like half his college career is him catching those passes. So, find ways to get him involved. And it's like, I think part of it is like Darnell Mooney has become so good in that area that it's like they almost don't need Pitts to do that as much because like Darnell Mooney is just like the first read there because he's been so damn good. But it's like, don't forget about Pitts. I almost wonder if like if Drake goes down, it's like, well, maybe Kyle Pitts should be your power slot now. Like, just like let him go run some of those routes. He doesn't run the short stuff as well as Drake, obviously, but it's like I feel like they need, like, this needs to be, I think, a turning point where it's like, man, we need to, like, there's no reason we shouldn't be blasting the run game as much as we can. And like, if we get these favorable looks, like on third down, we might want to consider running this, especially since teams seem to be like playing the pass on third down because the Falcons just don't run very often there unless it's like third and like super short. So, I'm curious if the Falcons will, I think obviously against the Broncos, a team that is locked down against the pass and not very good against the run. Like, obviously the Falcons are probably going to have to match the run game this week. But Drew Dahlman hopefully comes back. He'll help there too. That's really my only complaint about Ryan Newsel, who I think has been absolutely fine in pass pro. And like Newsel's play, like especially lately, like I think this week was one of his better games overall. But like, if you're strapped for cash, like, do you roll with Newsel and let Dahlman walk? I mean, I wouldn't have said that, but I wouldn't have even considered that before watching Newsel play this last couple of weeks. But like, that's one of those hard decisions you might have to make in the offseason is like, has Newsel shown you enough that you like trust him for a year or two while maybe you bring in somebody and see if you can groom another long-term center? Is Dahlman worth the contract he's going to get? Because he's probably going to get paid handsomely. That's going to be an interesting question. But before we get too far, we haven't talked about Younghoe Koo, and I know you spent quite a bit of time today on that analysis. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for that. And I mean, obviously 1 of 4. One kick was blocked. It looked pretty low to me. It didn't look great before it was blocked, but we don't really know how that would have gone. Maybe it still would have been okay. I don't know. But sort of your take on Koo's performance and what do you think our options are here? What should we do with Younghoe Koo?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to kind of talk about is like the mechanics and the process and everything like that. So at this point, there's been a lot of talk about how his form has changed and everything like that. So for starters, this is a process that's essentially been 2 years in the making. This isn't something that just started this year. When you go back and look you'll notice that it really picks up in 2023. And in 2022, he made a very, very slight adjustment. He got a little closer to the ball compared to 2021 and 2020, but it wasn't really noticeable enough for it to be something that's called out. Now he's essentially shortened the sideways steps from where a kicker starts. So kickers will take 3 steps back, 2 steps to the left. He takes basically 3 steps back and like essentially a half, maybe 3/4 step to the left now. And so he's shortened that route. And so one of the reasons that he would do that, and the reason he explained it himself, is that he's shortening the process of the kick. And so I went and I've looked, and it looks like he's shaving about 0.40 seconds off of his kicks, which is actually pretty impressive. And the advantage to that is obviously that it would lead to the defense or the field goal block team being able to interrupt the kick itself and block it. And so the other thing that Koo's mentioned with this is that while working through the process, he found that his kicks were tighter, which means less horizontal drift on their trajectory. They pretty much stick to their path. And he thought that he did lose some power, but as we saw this year, he still has enough to make it from 58 yards. And he didn't change his form any way for that one kick to generate more power. So we know he's still generating enough power to make kicks like that. And so where we're seeing some of the drawbacks of this kick change now is that he has essentially closed or shortened his margin for error when it comes to precision on his exit kick trajectory. And so basically the direction in which the ball is leaving his foot, he now has to be more precise because kickers moved to this modern way of kicking for a couple of reasons, but the main one was that they're able to get more surface area of the football. And so by doing so, they're able to have more control of the football. By changing this angle, Koo has to adjust his foot slightly differently and able to get and kind of cover the surface area of the football the same way he would before. The other thing that has changed is that his hips start open instead of the old way. They start closed, they open up as he goes towards the ball, and then they close when they make contact. Your plant foot is what is supposed to be pointing in the direction of where the football goes. If you look at how this change has affected Koo, the abrupt close on his new form seems to be putting a little bit more stress on that plant foot. And it looks like it's being left open a little wider than normal. And that's kind of why we're seeing his kicks primarily hook and pull to the left. And the other reason that they would be doing that is because that's your natural kicking motion. If you kick, you'll see that your foot and the toe tends to have a point to where it's going to go towards the left. That's all just basic physics. And so what it boils down to is Koo has basically sacrificed some precision on that exit trajectory in lieu of a faster process. And now if you're like, why would he do this? The same reason any other player does anything when they change up their game. They feel like they have found an edge. And Koo, technically, like I said, has sped up his process. We also saw this change go into effect last year. It's been slightly more dramatic this year, but he first put it into practice last year. Last year, he ended with the exact same field goal conversion rate, 86.5%, that he ended in 2022. Which was, like I said, 86.5%. So we saw this go on throughout the entire season. I would say it's a little closer this year, but it's not substantially closer to the point to where I think we should tell him, or that he will tell himself, he needs to change, he needs to go back to how it was before, so on and so forth. In the first 5 weeks, he was 12 of 14. One miss was from 41, and it was the penalty after the 46-yard attempt against Tampa Bay during the Kirktober debut. And so you look at that kick, okay, he had a penalty, he had to restart. Weird moment. Kickers are weird. That throws off the whole approach and everything like that. And he missed the one that the penalty happened on. So you're thinking like, okay, he's probably in his head a little bit. The other miss, same game, 54-yard attempt, it got blocked. So he wasn't performing bad doing this exact same thing. What I think happened is that he tried to tweak the process just a bit because he was losing a little bit of control on some kicks. They were still going in, but you could see that the process wasn't necessarily as clean. And what I think has happened is that he's just adjusted a little bit too much and is still trying to work back to getting into that sweet spot. I don't think it's a left hash versus right hash issue at Tampa Bay. He pushes the ball. He starts on the right hash, and you actually see he tries to correct for the natural swing by pushing it, and he pushes it too far to the right, and it ends up missing that way. From the center earlier this year, if you look at it, he has a kick. That's the one against Tampa. That's a miss. He starts in the center. But if you look, the ball comes out just a little bit to the left. And the farther you are away, the more exaggerated that becomes as the ball continues to move forward. And so we're seeing that he is actually having very clean kicks in terms of when they come out from his foot, there's like a 99% chance that it's going to go in a straight line from where it is, but he's not aiming it correctly once he makes contact with the football.
Yeah, well, that's a great explanation and definitely more than I or most people understand about the kicking game. But I think you explained it well, and it seems like it's small changes, and because it's small changes, the chance for there to be a slight change again could mean that everything goes in. So again, and the further away you are, the more difference a small change of 2 degrees this way or that way adds up over a 50-plus yard field goal attempt to that's 5 yards to the left or 5 yards to the right. So I think that does make sense. And there's a lot of reasons why like the Falcons aren't going to move on from Koo unless they have no choice. Like that, obviously the contract does protect him to some extent, but the team really does have a lot of trust in him. And that they deservedly so. 4 years of good kicking here in Atlanta. You don't just throw that away, but also this is a results-driven league, and teams are, everywhere across the NFL, you can see it. Teams are very intolerant of kicking issues. The 49ers with Jake Moody, again, that's a dicey situation for the rookie, and we'll see, they still haven't made a change there, but that's definitely costing them as well. With Koo, I sort of believe that he's got probably through the bye week, and then if he comes out of the bye week and hasn't the Broncos game, obviously that will be important for him. If he has a good game there, he's probably fine. But if he struggles in the Broncos game, comes out of the bye and has another bad game, if he doesn't play well in the Broncos game, we're going to see a kicker added, I imagine, like to the practice squad or something. Yeah. So they can start working on getting the other guys some reps in the bye week. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, though. Like, I hope that you could just have a good game against the Broncos, make some slight adjustments. These things are, they're very, like you explained it, it's like these small changes make a big difference. And, again, I think people, questioning, why would you change what's working? It's like, these are pro athletes. Like, they're trying to improve. Like, you never want to rest on your laurels and be like, oh, well, it's good enough. Like, I'm good enough where I am. This is the NFL. Like, guys are always pushing, always trying to grow to be the best they can in this league where it's the best of the best. And sometimes it doesn't work. Like, sometimes it introduces problems. When we've seen that happen to other guys. So, this is a critical time for Koo. I think he's obviously earned the benefit of the doubt, and he's going to get it from the team. But the benefit of the doubt only gets you so far. And hopefully we don't have to continue having this conversation, and Koo can, finish strong and have a good couple weeks here going into the bye and coming out of the bye. And we could put this discussion to rest. But yeah, fascinating look at the process, because we mentioned it kind of on Twitter, but it is like a golf swing. It's such a specific thing for each person. And we've seen pro golfers try to change their swing. And for some guys, it's like, oh, now I'm I'm a top level guy. driving this thing. And for some guys, it's like, now I got the yips and I can't hit a damn thing, and it's like they only changed their stance like a tiny bit, but it threw everything off. So, hopefully it'll be the former for Koo, and he can unlock what he was hoping to unlock and eliminate the issues. But, it's a tough situation, and
Yeah.
just there's not a lot of patience out there for kickers in this league. It's just kind of the way it is.
No, there's not. But you're right, Kevin. I think that one, you have to look at the process of what bringing in another kicker means. It's not like bringing in, any other position, because you have to get the kicker acclimated to the environment. You need to see them multiple times throughout practice, because you have to see how consistently can they do this. This isn't something that you're going to be able to ascertain through one single workout. That first workout is, really just weeding out the guys that are out there on free agency. And so you look at like what's ahead. Denver famously very favorable to kickers. The thin air helps with distance. You usually see most guys hit their career longs at Mile High Stadium. It's just an environment that really plays to the kicking game and the strengths of kickers. So you hope that he can get right in an environment like that, which kind of like plays into and, doesn't really leave him concerned with the thoughts of if he has enough leg for anything like that. And then you touched on it earlier, the contract situation. If you, get rid of or cut Koo, that's $3.75 million dead cap hit. Well, then you also have to add in the cost of whoever you are replacing him with. And so you kind of really can't afford to get into this position where you are now eating up dead cap for 7 games, because that's how many games are left in the regular season. Like, obviously we have playoff aspirations, and you want to make sure that you have somebody that can get the job done then, but it would be very rash for them to just kind of go out and throw all of this away. You brought up Moody, who's in his second year now. He had a rough rookie season. He went 1 for 4 yesterday as well. And you see teams stick with some guys who have the better resumes. Moody's not one of those guys. 49ers, they just really don't have any other options. But someone like Koo has kind of earned a little bit of clout in terms of, hey, I'm going to be able to come back and work through this. Koo had like a 3-week slump last year, or like a 5-game slump to end the season, actually. And he had a 3-game slump to start the season before that. He has worked out of slumps before, and we've seen him kind of be able to correct and get things right for the team when needed. And so I don't think there's any reason to believe that he can't do that so far. It's been a tale of 2 different seasons for him when you look at the first 5 weeks and you look at the second 5 weeks.
Yeah, and that's going to be the difference is which version of Koo is the one that's going to show up the rest of the season. That's probably going to determine his future here in Atlanta. I'm certainly pulling for him to come out of the slump, because such a great story, such a fun guy. You could see it on the sideline with Arthur Blank, just giving him a big hug and being like, look, man, like you're gonna be able to like we trust you, like you just like it's okay. Koo came right out and said it in his press conference, and that's what you want to hear from these guys. You don't want to hear any hiding or blame game stuff. He's like, yeah, like I got to be better. Like this is not, what I'm trying to put out there, and then I cost us this game. And it's like, yeah, thank you for saying that. Like it's hard to say that, but that he recognizes the issues. Like there's no question that he's not just burying his head in the sand and being like, everything's fine. Yeah, I don't need to do anything. So that does give us all hope, I think, and I think he has earned the benefit of the doubt, and we will hope that he can improve here and finish strong this season. And the Falcons don't need to wade back into the kicker market, because that's a bad market to be. The Falcons have had very good luck in the kicker market, but it's one of those things, just like the quarterback market. Like you really just don't want to spend time having to think about that, and you'd be much better off just keeping a consistent guy for as long as you can. And the Falcons obviously have been very fortunate in that regard over the years. So we'll hope that continues with Younghoe Koo here. But anything else you wanted to touch on, Tre'Shon, before we sign off here?
No, I think that like we kind of said at the beginning, the season's not over. Like obviously, disappointing loss But 6-4, you got one game before you head into the bye, a bye game that like we desperately need. Just kind of looking at all the injuries we have, so really just hoping that the Falcons can kind of take care of this pseudo third Saints game is kind of how I'm looking at it, with with Sean Payton at the helm. So I think boys take care of business. We'll be fine. Something to remember: the Falcons 20. We've seen all these comparisons to 2016. Falcons started off 6-3. You know what happened after that? They lost 2 in a row, or they lost the next 2 out of 3 to be 7-5 before they went on that run. So just keep that in mind. If you're somebody that's been looking for all of these comparisons and the duality between those 2 seasons, the team was 7-5 before they started playing complete football at a different level than they had been before the entire year.
That's right. Yes, and while that timeline would be most welcome to see that play out again, I do think it's okay to question the issues of the team. Not sure we should be waving everything off because 2016 could still happen. I'm not sure I'd hitch my wagon to the 2016 repeat. Like I would love that if we could see the best season of Falcons history repeat itself. But probably unlikely to see that. But team obviously doesn't have a daunting schedule in the second half. They have some games that they're going to have to win, because the Bucs have a cake schedule. I mean, the Chargers are the only team with a winning record. I think they play the entire rest of the season. So, and like the Falcons have like over a 90% chance to make the playoffs. So like this is all, more qualitative than quantitative, because the stats say like the Bucs are probably going to scuffle and lose a game they shouldn't, and that's probably going to knock them out. Like now that they've lost these last 2 games, the Falcons just have to go 4-4 the rest of the way, and the Bucs basically can afford one more loss, and that's it. Yeah. So, that's a tall order for a team that has arguably the worst defense in football to pull off perfect football for the rest of the way. That Bucs team is really feisty, and like Liam Cohen is clearly calling an amazing offense there with the limitations that they have. But like they still have to go 7-1, like, or I guess it's like 7 or maybe 6-1 now or whatever it is. But and if they don't, they just like, but the Falcons also have to win games still. Like they can't just go in the tank and expect to just coast into the playoffs, because the Bucs do have a really easy schedule, and the chances of them like running the table on that schedule, I think, are higher than they would be in most situations, because it's an easy schedule. Like, and this is the NFL. Like, there's going to be upsets and there's going to be things that go wrong, but the same thing applies to the Falcons, right? I mean, they're going to have to beat some of these teams to get to the playoffs comfortably. And if they struggle against, like, they got to play the Broncos where they're not favored. They've got to play the Chargers. They've got to play the Vikings, and they've got to play the Commanders. The other games are not, you don't really need to worry too much about those. You got the Raiders, the Giants, and the Panthers. And you're expecting to win those games like that. None of those teams are really terrifying you at any point. But at the same time, like, you can't afford, now that you lose this game, you can't really afford any more bad losses. Like, because if the Bucs don't falter, if they play great football, they can still pass you. Like, it's not out of the question. So that's why I think, myself and some others are like, this team like needs to finish strong still. They can't just think that because they swept the Bucs and have this lead that they're safe. They're not safe at all. Like, they need to finish. But I think this with this team, with the offense where it is, they're likely to finish. Like, they're obviously much more likely to make the playoffs than not. That I feel like that 90% number is maybe too generous. I get that it's like mathematical, and I see the reasons for that. They've got the tiebreakers locked up and all this stuff, but it's still not comfortable for me, and maybe that's just because I'm just completely burned by this team over the past 7 years. But I need them to finish strong and not let us down here, because if they blow this 93% chance of making the playoffs, there's not going to be a lot of happy fans this offseason. So they still have to finish. That they've started better than I think a lot of people expected. They're certainly better than I thought they'd be going into this point of the season still, even with this loss, but still got to finish. That's kind of the takeaway for this team. And to be fair to them, most weeks they have finished, right? Like they've been good at one-score games. They have finished where they've needed to. Just need to keep that going as we get going into the rest of the season. But guys, thank you so much for joining us here on Tuesday Takes. I'm Kevin Knight of Falcon Kevin. He's Tre'Shon Diaz at Tre'Shon on the Twitters. Check out the thread there with the Koo breakdown with some videos and some great insight. That's very helpful if you're trying to get some more intel there. Or you could just say that, he can't talk about it because he's not an NFL kicker. So I guess you could also just do that and ignore the thread. That's your right. But I suggest you read it because it's insightful. But thank you guys so much for joining us. Like, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Leave that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. That helps us out. Leave a comment. We love reading those from you guys too. Check out the Patreon. It's patreon.com/Falcoholic Live if you want to support the show. Same thing with the channel memberships on YouTube. We'll be back Wednesday night for the next episode of Falcoholic Live at 8 p.m. Eastern. And of course, we'll have a Falcons at Broncos preview coming for you later in the week. And then we'll be back for another post-game show on Sunday evening because it's an afternoon game over there on the West Coast. So until next time, guys, thanks so much for joining us on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. We'll see you then. Have a great day, folks.